The morning sun cast long shadows across the military airfield as Colonel Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the tarmac, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The emergency meeting had been called just 3 hours ago, and now representatives from 12 different alien species surrounded him in a loose semicircle, their various appendages folded or tucked in gestures that their translators assured him meant impatience. The Krellian ambassador, a being that resembled a mantis made of crystalline structures, clicked its mandibles together in rapid succession. "Colonel Webb, we understand your planet has been accepted into the Galactic Defense Initiative, but this exercise seems unnecessarily primitive. We have faster-than-light capable fighters waiting in orbit. Why must we observe atmospheric craft?" Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside he felt a familiar surge of pride. Earth had only joined the galactic community 6 months ago, and already the aliens thought they knew everything about human capabilities. They had seen humanity's basic space vessels, the clunky generation ships that had barely made it to Mars before first contact. What they hadn't seen was what humanity had built for war on their home soil. "Because, Ambassador, the scenario we're training for involves planetary defense after orbital superiority has been compromised," Marcus explained, his voice carrying across the field. "If your fancy ships get knocked out of the sky, you need something that can still fight in atmosphere, something that can take damage and keep flying." A Velothian officer, whose species looked remarkably like dolphins with mechanical suits, made a sound that the translator rendered as a dismissive laugh. "Primitive. Our strike craft are equipped with energy shields and plasma cannons. What could your ancient combustion-based aircraft possibly offer?" Marcus smiled then, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I told my squadron leaders that any jet is acceptable for this demonstration. Let's see what they choose." The alien delegation shifted, their attention turning skyward. They had been briefed to expect something like the human F-35, or perhaps one of the newer F-47 models that incorporated some basic alien technology. Clean, sleek aircraft that looked like they belonged in space combat. Instead, the sound that reached them first was wrong. It wasn't the scream of modern jet engines or the whisper of advanced propulsion. It was a deep, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very air, a sound like reality itself was being torn apart by spinning metal teeth. "What is that noise?" the Krellian ambassador asked, its translator conveying genuine confusion. Marcus's smile widened. "That's the sound of 30mm rounds being fired at 70 rounds per second. We call it the sound of freedom, but most pilots just call it brrrr." The A-10 Thunderbolt came in low, impossibly low, skimming just 100 feet above the runway. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't elegant. The aircraft looked like someone had strapped wings to a gun and added engines as an afterthought. Its profile was blocky, angular, built for function rather than form. Compared to the sleek alien vessels hovering in the distance, it looked like a relic, a flying tank that had no business sharing the same sky. The pilot brought the Warthog around in a banking turn that showcased the aircraft's incredible maneuverability at low speeds. As it passed directly in front of the observation area, the GU-8 Avenger rotary cannon mounted in the nose unleashed a 3-second burst at a target range set up 2 kilometers away. The sound was indescribable. The aliens, many of whom had never heard anything louder than the hum of energy weapons, physically recoiled. Several of the smaller species dropped to the ground, their biological instincts screaming danger. The brrrt of the cannon was followed immediately by the sight of the target area simply ceasing to exist, torn apart by depleted uranium rounds moving at supersonic speeds. "By the Great Void," whispered the Velothian officer, his mechanical suit speakers barely functioning. "What manner of weapon is that?" "That's a GU-8 Avenger," Marcus said casually as if he was discussing a household appliance. "Fires 30mm armor-piercing rounds. The recoil is so strong that if the pilot holds the trigger too long, it can actually slow the aircraft down. We built the plane around the gun, not the other way around." The A-10 came around for another pass, this time demonstrating its ability to operate at speeds that would stall most modern fighters. It hung in the air like a predatory bird, its nose pointed down at an angle that seemed to defy physics. The pilot activated the aircraft's electronic countermeasures, releasing a cascade of flares that lit up the morning sky like a fireworks display. "Your shields are impressive," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "But they require massive amounts of energy. They can be overwhelmed or bypassed. That aircraft doesn't have shields. You know what it has instead? The aliens remained silent, mesmerized by the display before them. Redundancy, Marcus answered his own question. That plane can lose an engine and fly home. It can lose half a wing and fly home. It can take hits from anti-aircraft fire that would obliterate your strike craft, and the pilot will still bring it home. We've had A-10s land safely with one engine gone, hydraulics destroyed, and holes you could throw a basketball through. The cockpit is surrounded by titanium bathtub armor. The fuel tanks are self-sealing. Every critical system has a backup, and those backups have backups. The demonstration continued for another 10 minutes. The pilot showcased the A-10's ability to operate from rough, unprepared airfields, its incredible loiter time that allowed it to stay over a battlefield for hours, and its precision targeting systems that could identify and destroy targets smaller than most alien fighters while under heavy fire. When the aircraft finally touched down, landing on a runway that Marcus had deliberately left damaged and cratered, the silence from the alien delegation was absolute. The A-10 taxied to a stop in front of them, its engines powering down with a whine that somehow sounded satisfied. The pilot climbed out, a young woman named Captain Sarah Chen, who looked remarkably unimpressed with herself. She saluted Marcus casually, then turned to regard the stunned aliens with a slight smirk. "Sir, you said any jet was acceptable," she said. "I brought the best close air support platform humanity ever built. 350 miles per hour of ugly, mean, and utterly reliable. She might not be pretty, but she'll be flying long after everything else is grounded." Colonel Webb nodded, then turned back to the alien delegation. His expression was serious now, all traces of humor gone. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings, Earth didn't survive thousands of years of warfare by building the most advanced weapons. We survived by building weapons that work when everything else fails. Welcome to human military doctrine." The Krellian ambassador stepped forward slowly, its crystalline body reflecting the morning light in fractured patterns. "Colonel Webb, I believe we may have underestimated your species' approach to warfare. This aircraft, it is crude by our standards, but I begin to understand its purpose." "Good," Marcus replied, "because that's just the first lesson. We have 6 more demonstrations planned, and trust me, they only get more interesting from here." The afternoon sun was merciless as Colonel Webb led the alien delegation to a different section of the base. The delegates had spent their lunch break in animated discussion, their translators working overtime to convey the mixture of skepticism and grudging interest that the morning's demonstration had generated. The Velothian officer, whose name was approximately pronounced as Threxnel, had spent 20 minutes examining the A-10 up close, running his mechanical appendages over the battle-scarred fuselage with something approaching reverence. "Your aircraft shows signs of repeated repair," Threxnel observed as they walked. "In my fleet, we would retire such a vessel and replace it with newer models. Surely your industrial capacity allows for continuous replacement?" Marcus glanced at the dolphin-like alien, noting the genuine curiosity rather than contempt in the question. "We could replace them, sure. We've tried, actually, twice. But here's the thing about the A-10. Pilots love it, ground troops love it, and nothing we've built since does the job better. So we keep upgrading them, keep maintaining them, because why fix what isn't broken?" They arrived at what appeared to be a combat simulation center, a massive building with reinforced walls and observation galleries running along its length. Inside, a mock battlefield had been constructed, complete with artificial terrain, pop-up targets, and various obstacles designed to simulate urban and rural combat environments. "Today's demonstration involves close air support coordination," Marcus announced, gesturing to the gallery where the aliens could observe safely. "One of the most critical aspects of atmospheric combat is the ability to provide support to ground forces without harming friendly units. Precision matters more than power when your troops are 50 meters from the enemy." A Xynthian commander, a reptilian being whose scales shifted colors with her mood, hissed softly. "Our orbital strikes can eliminate entire grid squares with pinpoint accuracy from space." "Why would you need atmospheric craft for precision?" "Because sometimes you can't call in orbital strikes," Marcus replied. "Weather, interference, political considerations, or simply because your orbital assets are busy elsewhere. When troops are in contact with the enemy, they need support now, not in 30 minutes when the targeting solution is perfect." The simulation began. Below in the combat arena, a squad of human soldiers in training gear moved through the artificial terrain. their movements tracked by sensors and displayed on holographic screens for the aliens to observe. Enemy targets began appearing, some clearly marked as hostile, others deliberately placed close to friendly. Positions to test discrimination. The familiar sound of the A-10's engines filled the building as Captain Chen brought the Warthog into the simulation space through massive bay doors. The aircraft flew through the artificial environment at incredibly low altitude, the pilot's head on a constant swivel as she acquired targets and communicated with the ground team. Falcon 1, this is Hog 2-3. I have eyes on your position. Chen's voice crackled over the speakers. Identify target building, over. The ground team leader marked a structure with a laser designator, one that sat uncomfortably close to their own position. Hog 2-3 target is the 3-story structure bearing 095 from our position, approximately 60 meters. Be advised we have civilian markers in the adjacent buildings. What happened next happened fast. The A-10 came around in a tight circle, its nose dropping to acquire the target. Chen fired a single burst from the GAU-8, and the marked building simply disintegrated. The precision was surgical, the rounds impacting exactly where designated and nowhere else. Sensors confirmed zero collateral damage to the surrounding structures. Target destroyed, no collateral, Chen reported. Moving to holding pattern, ready for next tasking. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the scenario continued. Time and again, the ground team called in strikes on targets positioned in increasingly difficult situations, behind friendly lines, in dense urban terrain, mixed with civilian markers. Every time Chen and the A-10 delivered exactly what was requested, nothing more, nothing less. The pilot is flying manually, asked a Centauri observer, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish of pure energy contained in a humanoid suit. Our systems are entirely automated for such precision work. The chance of organic error seems unacceptably high. Marcus turned to face the Centauri directly. You're right that automation reduces some errors, but it introduces others. Chen isn't just following targeting data. She's reading the battlefield, interpreting what the ground team needs and making judgment calls that no computer could make. Watch this next part. The simulation shifted. The ground team suddenly found themselves taking fire from multiple positions, the scenario changing to reflect the chaos of real combat. Their calls for support became urgent, overlapping, conflicting. One squad leader called for strikes on a target to the north. Another screamed for help to the east. A third reported wounded and requested immediate suppression fire to facilitate evacuation. Chen didn't hesitate. Her voice came over the radio calm and assured, cutting through the chaos. All Falcon elements, Hog 2-3, I copy all requests. Prioritizing by threat level, stand by. The A-10 banked hard, coming around to engage the eastern target first, the one threatening the wounded soldiers. A burst from the GU-8 silenced that position. Without waiting for confirmation, Chen was already lining up the northern target, her hands and feet working the controls with practiced precision. Another burst, another threat eliminated. She spiraled the aircraft around to provide suppression fire for the evacuation, not destroying targets but forcing the simulated enemy to keep their heads down. That's triage, Marcus explained to the watching aliens. She assessed 3 critical situations in seconds and responded in the order that saved the most lives. An automated system would have followed preset protocols, probably engaged the first target called regardless of actual priority. Human judgment, human intuition, that's what makes the difference. The demonstration concluded with Chen bringing the A-10 to hover in the center of the simulation space, a maneuver that showcased the aircraft's incredible low-speed handling. She rotated the plane slowly, giving the aliens a full view of the weapon systems, the battle damage the fuselage could withstand, and the pilot herself visible in the cockpit. Threxnell moved closer to the glass, his mechanical suit whirring softly. I begin to understand, Colonel. Your species does not seek technological superiority. You seek reliability and adaptability. We seek what works, Marcus corrected gently. Look, your plasma cannons are impressive. Your energy shields are miracles of engineering. But they're complex, they require specific conditions to function optimally. And when they fail catastrophically. The A-10 is simple by comparison. Simple enough that a crew chief can fix most problems with basic tools. Simple enough that pilots can fly it on instinct when all the electronics are fried. Simple enough that it just keeps working no matter what you throw at it. The Krellian ambassador had been silent throughout the demonstration, but now it clicked forward, its crystalline body chiming softly. You mentioned this is only the second demonstration. What else do you intend to show us? Marcus checked his watch, then smiled that thin smile again. Well, we've shown you the platform. Now we need to show you the tactics. Human close air support doctrine wasn't developed in a lab or simulated in computers. It was written in blood over decades of warfare. Every procedure, every communication protocol, every tactical decision tree exists because someone learned it the hard way. He gestured toward the door. Next, we're going to show you what happens when everything goes wrong. When communications are jammed, when weather is terrible, when the pilot is wounded and the aircraft is damaged, when by all logical analysis the mission should be aborted. That's when you'll see what makes the A-10 and its pilots truly special. Captain Chen had landed the Warthog and was climbing out, her flight suit dark with sweat from the intense concentration required for the simulation. She approached the observation gallery, pulled off her helmet, and regarded the aliens with an expression that mixed exhaustion and satisfaction. "Sir, the ground team wants to know if we're running Scenario 7 next," she said. "The one where nothing works right and everything's on fire?" "That's exactly what we're running, Captain," Marcus confirmed. "Think you and your bird are up for it?" Chen laughed, a sound without humor but full of confidence. "Sir, that's not a scenario for us. That's just Tuesday." The storm generators activated at precisely 1400 hours, filling the simulation chamber with artificial weather that would make any sane pilot turn back. Rain hammered down with tropical intensity, visibility dropped to near zero, and wind shear indicators screamed warnings that would ground any sensible aircraft. The alien delegation watched from their climate-controlled observation gallery as the conditions inside the chamber deteriorated into something resembling a Category 3 hurricane. "This is madness," declared Threxnall, his mechanical suit adjusting its visual sensors to try and pierce the artificial storm. "No pilot would attempt combat operations in such conditions. Even our most advanced craft would struggle with the sensor interference." Marcus stood with his hands behind his back, watching the monitors that showed what the aliens couldn't see through the storm. "You're absolutely right. No sane pilot would choose these conditions. But combat doesn't care about what's sane or optimal. Sometimes the enemy attacks during a storm because they think you can't respond. Sometimes your troops need help right now, and the weather isn't going to improve for hours. That's when you find out what your equipment and people are really made of." The Xinthian commander's scales had shifted to a color that the translator indicated meant concern. "Your pilot will attempt to operate in this? Can she even see the ground from her craft?" "Barely," Marcus admitted. "Her instruments are going to be compromised by the electromagnetic interference we're pumping into the chamber. Her targeting systems will be degraded. Communication will be spotty at best. This scenario is designed to strip away all the advantages of modern warfare and force the pilot back to basics." On the monitors, they could see Captain Chen in the ready room, checking her gear one final time. She wasn't showing any signs of hesitation, just methodical preparation. Her crew chief, a grizzled sergeant named Rodriguez, was doing a final walk-around of the A-10, checking control surfaces and weapon systems despite the driving rain. "Tell me something." "Colonel," the Centauri observer asked, its energy form pulsing with what might have been curiosity. "If the conditions are this dangerous, why not simply wait? Surely no tactical situation demands such risk." Marcus turned to face the alien, his expression grave. 3 years ago, a human colony on the edge of our explored space came under attack. The assault came during a massive storm system, something that lasted for days. Our orbital assets couldn't get a clear shot through the atmospheric interference. Our modern fighters couldn't operate safely in the conditions, but there were 20,000 civilians down there, and the enemy wasn't going to wait for clear skies. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. 6 A-10 pilots volunteered to fly support missions through that storm. They couldn't use their fancy targeting systems. They had to rely on ground team laser designators and their own Mark I eyeballs. They flew for 8 hours straight, refueling from tankers that could barely hold station in the turbulence. All 6 planes took damage. 2 pilots were wounded, but they held that line until reinforcements could arrive. That's why we trained for this. The sound of the A-10's engines firing up cut through even the roar of the simulated storm. Chen brought the Warthog to the entrance of the simulation chamber, the aircraft rocking in the violent winds. For a moment she held position, letting the engines stabilize, and then she pushed forward into the maelstrom. The visibility was so poor that the aircraft vanished from view almost immediately. The aliens crowded around the monitors, watching sensor feeds and infrared displays that painted a ghostly picture of the A-10 fighting its way through the storm. The plane bucked and weaved, caught in wind currents that would have torn a lighter aircraft apart. Hog 2-3. Falcon Actual. The ground team leader's voice crackled over the speakers, nearly lost in static. We are taking heavy fire from grid coordinates. Static. Coordinates unclear, repeat coordinates unclear. Multiple casualties, immediate assistance required. Chen's response was calm despite the chaos. Falcon Actual, Hog 2-3 copies. I'm having trouble with my GPS. Pop smoke if you can, any color, just need a reference point. Down in the simulation arena, the ground team activated smoke grenades. The colored smoke was immediately shredded by the wind, but it gave Chen a momentary visual reference. She banked the A-10 hard, fighting the controls as crosswinds tried to flip the aircraft. The aliens watched in fascinated horror as she brought the plane down to an altitude that seemed suicidally low, skimming just above the simulated terrain. I can't get a clean lock, Chen reported. My targeting pod is useless in this weather. Falcon Actual, I need you to guide me onto target by voice. Call out corrections. What followed was something the aliens had never seen in their advanced automated warfare. The ground team leader talked Chen onto the target using nothing but estimates and eyeball calculations. Hog 2-3 target is 200 meters east of the smoke bearing, I'd say 085 degrees. 3-story structure northeast corner. Chen adjusted her flight path and the aliens could see her literally leaning forward in the cockpit, straining to see through the rain and darkness. I think I have it. Stand by for gun run. The GAU-8 roared, and even through the storm the sound was unmistakable. The targeted building exploded in a shower of debris. Chen pulled up hard, fighting the wind, and circled back around. Good hits, the ground team leader called. Falcon 2 needs support now. They're about 400 meters north of my position, taking fire from multiple angles. For the next 20 minutes, Chen worked the battlefield like a conductor leading an orchestra. She couldn't rely on her sophisticated targeting systems. Her radar was mostly useless. Her infrared sensors were overwhelmed by the temperature variations in the storm. She flew by instinct and experience, using the ground team's calls and brief glimpses of the terrain to guide her strikes. Then the simulation threw its worst curve. Alarms blared in the cockpit, and the monitoring systems showed that one of the A-10's engines had taken a simulated hit. The aircraft immediately lost power and altitude, yawing hard to one side. Engine 2 is out, I'm losing hydraulic pressure, Chen reported, her voice tight but controlled. Switching to manual reversion mode, the Velothian officer made a sound of distress. She must abort. The aircraft is crippled. But Chen didn't abort. She fought the controls, muscling the damaged A-10 back to level flight on a single engine. The aircraft was barely controllable, every maneuver requiring enormous physical effort, but she kept it in the air. More importantly, she kept it over the battlefield. Falcon Actual, Hog 2-3. I've taken some damage, but I'm still mission capable. Continue to pass targets. Marcus watched the aliens' reactions carefully. Some looked horrified. Some looked impressed. The Krellian ambassador's crystalline body was vibrating at a frequency that the translator said indicated intense emotional response. Chen completed 2 more attack runs on the damaged aircraft, each one a testament to her skill and the A-10's resilient design. She destroyed the remaining targets, verified that the ground team was clear, and only then did she limp the aircraft toward the recovery area. The landing was rough, but successful. The A-10 touched down hard, bounced once, and rolled to a stop. The simulation ended, the storm generators powering down, and sudden silence filled the chamber. Chen sat in the cockpit for a long moment, breathing hard from the physical exertion of flying the damaged aircraft. Before finally climbing out, she dropped to the ground, pulled off her helmet, and immediately walked over to Sergeant Rodriguez. How bad is it, really? I felt like the stick was going to break off in my hands during those last turns. Rodriguez was already examining the landing gear, running his hands over components with practiced ease. You put some stress on her, Captain, not going to lie. But nothing we can't fix. This bird has been through worse. The alien delegation filed down from the observation gallery, their movements slower and more thoughtful than before. They gathered around the A-10, examining the aircraft with new appreciation. The artificial damage from the simulation was marked clearly on the fuselage, showing where hits had compromised various systems. Threxnell approached Chen directly, his mechanical suit allowing him to meet her at eye level. Captain Chen, I must admit I did not believe such a feat was possible. To continue the mission with major systems failure, to fly manually through such conditions, this defies all logical risk assessment. Chen smiled tiredly, wiping rain and sweat from her face. Sir, with respect, logic doesn't always apply in combat. Sometimes you just do what needs to be done and figure out the details later. The Krellian ambassador moved forward, its crystalline body chiming softly. Colonel Webb, I believe I must revise my earlier assessments of human military capability. This demonstration has revealed something we did not expect to find in a newly spacefaring species. And what's that? Marcus asked. Experience, the ambassador replied simply. Your technology may be primitive by our standards, but your tactical doctrine, your training, your willingness to operate in impossible conditions, these things only come from genuine combat experience. Most species join the Galactic Defense Initiative without ever having fought a major war. Earth has fought thousands. Evening was settling over the base when Colonel Webb gathered the alien delegation in the briefing room. The day's demonstrations had clearly affected them, their earlier skepticism replaced by cautious interest and, in some cases, genuine respect. Captain Chen had joined them, still in her flight suit, along with several other A-10 pilots who had arrived for the next phase of the demonstration. Before we continue, Marcus began, pulling up a holographic display, I want to address something I've noticed from our guests. You keep calling our equipment primitive, our tactics crude, our approach outdated, and by your standards, maybe you're right. But there's something you need to understand about human military philosophy. He expanded the hologram to show a timeline of human warfare, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. Every species in the Galactic Defense Initiative seems to have a similar story. You achieved spaceflight, you developed advanced weapons, and you stopped fighting each other. Peace through technology. That's admirable, truly. But Earth took a different path. The timeline highlighted various human conflicts, some recent enough that the smoke hadn't cleared. We fought each other continuously right up until first contact. We got very, very good at killing each other. Then you arrived and told us about threats in the galaxy, about hostile species and interdimensional incursions and all the nightmares waiting in the dark between stars. You know what our first thought was? The Xinthian commander's scales shifted to an inquisitive blue. What was your first thought, Colonel? Finally, Marcus said with a slight smile. Someone else to fight besides ourselves. Maybe if we focus all this aggression outward, we'll stop tearing each other apart. But more importantly, we realized we had something you didn't. Recent, brutal, continuous combat experience. Not simulations, not historical data. Real warfare where people die if you make mistakes. He gestured to Captain Chen and the other pilots. These people aren't flying the A-10 because we can't afford better aircraft. They're flying it because it's the right tool for specific jobs. Now I promised you 6 demonstrations. We've covered the platform, the tactics, and operations under adverse conditions. Next, I want to show you something that no amount of technology can replace. Marcus pulled up a mission briefing on the hologram. Tomorrow, we're running a full-scale combat exercise against our most advanced drone fighters. These drones use alien technology that we've acquired through trade and reverse engineering. They're faster than the A-10, more maneuverable, equipped with energy weapons and shields. By every metric, they should win decisively. But we're going to show you why they won't. Threxnall leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. You intend to prove that your outdated aircraft can defeat superior technology? This seems unlikely, Colonel. Not just defeat, Marcus corrected. Dominate. Because those drones are running on artificial intelligence, battle management algorithms developed by species that have been spacefaring for millennia. They should be perfect. But they're fighting human pilots who have one critical advantage. Which is? The Centauri observer asked. We're creative, we're unpredictable, and we're mean. Chen interjected, speaking up for the first time. Sir, if I may? Marcus nodded, yielding the floor to her. Chen stood, moving to the holographic display with the casual confidence of someone who lived in cockpits. Your AI systems are probably incredible at calculating optimal attack vectors and predicted outcomes. But you know what they can't do? They can't think outside the box. They can't break their own rules. And they definitely can't be stubborn enough to win when math says they should lose. She manipulated the hologram, showing footage from previous exercises. Last month, we ran a smaller version of this exercise. 5 A-10s against 20 advanced drones. The drones had every advantage. Speed, weapons range, defensive systems. The scenario was designed to be unwinnable for us. We were supposed to last maybe 10 minutes before being overwhelmed. The hologram played the exercise footage. The aliens watched as the A-10s immediately did something unexpected. They split up and went low, hugging the terrain in ways that made the drones' targeting solutions exponentially more complex. They used the environment as a weapon, leading drones into terrain features that disrupted their flight patterns. They coordinated without constant radio communication, relying on pre-briefed tactics and hand signals when they passed close enough to see each other. 35 minutes into the exercise, we'd destroyed all 20 drones and lost 2 aircraft. Chen continued. The drones kept trying to engage us in the optimal manner according to their programming. We kept doing things that made no logical sense. We'd fire at drones we had no realistic chance of hitting, not to destroy them but to force them to maneuver into positions where our wingmen could get shots. We'd break off from kills to provide cover for damaged aircraft. We'd waste ammunition on suppression fire that served no immediate tactical purpose, but set up opportunities minutes later. One of the other pilots, a young lieutenant named Kovac, spoke up. The post-exercise analysis was hilarious. The AI kept flagging our tactics as erratic behavior and suboptimal decision-making. It couldn't understand that we weren't trying to fight efficiently. We were trying to win ugly. The Krellian ambassador's crystalline body chimed thoughtfully. You are describing what we would call chaos theory applied to warfare, introducing so much unpredictability that the enemy cannot develop effective countermeasures. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Your AI systems are powerful, but they rely on patterns, on predictable behaviors, on logical decision trees. Human pilots don't. We do stupid things that work. We take risks that no computer would approve. We develop tactics on the fly based on nothing more than gut instinct and desperation. He pulled up another display, this one showing combat statistics. Look at this data from the Galactic Defense Initiative's own simulations. AI-controlled fighters have a 97% success rate in standardized combat scenarios. They're incredibly effective, but put them against human pilots in non-standard scenarios, and that success rate drops below 70%. You know why? Because we cheat. We change the rules. We do things that aren't in the tactical databases. The Velothian officer's mechanical suit whirred as he processed this information. You are weaponizing illogical behavior. This is a fascinating concept. But surely there must be limits. What happens when you encounter an enemy that is equally unpredictable? Then it gets interesting, Chen replied with a grin. And that's what makes humans dangerous. We don't just accept chaos, we thrive in it. The more confused the battlefield gets, the more variables are in play, the better we perform relative to AI systems. Because when everything goes sideways and the plan falls apart, humans don't freeze up trying to recalculate. We improvise. Marcus gestured to the assembled pilots. Tomorrow's demonstration will involve 12 A-10s against 50 advanced drones in a combat scenario that covers 200 square kilometers of varied terrain. The drones will be programmed with learning algorithms, able to adapt to our tactics as the exercise progresses. They'll have access to our service records, our flight profiles, our preferred maneuvers. They'll know everything about how we fly. He paused for effect. And we're still going to tear them apart. Because knowing what we did before doesn't tell you what we'll do next. That's the advantage of human creativity over artificial intelligence. We can be stupid in brand new ways every single time. The alien delegation exchanged glances, their various forms of non-verbal communication creating a susurrus of sound and movement. Finally, the Centauri observer spoke, its energy form pulsing rapidly. Colonel Webb, I believe I speak for many of us when I say that Earth's application for full military integration into the Galactic Defense Initiative may have been premature. Marcus felt his stomach drop. After all this, they still thought humans weren't ready. The Centauri continued. Not because you lack the capability, but because we lack the understanding of how to integrate human warfare doctrine into our existing frameworks. Your approach to combat is so fundamentally different from anything in our databases that we may need to completely revise our tactical planning. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Marcus asked carefully. The Krellian ambassador answered, its translator conveying something that might have been amusement. It is a terrifying thing, Colonel, which in military terms is often very good indeed. I find myself both grateful that humans are allies and deeply sympathetic to any enemy foolish enough to face you in battle. Threxnell made a gesture that his suit translated as thoughtful agreement. I have fought in 17 campaigns across 4 different stellar conflicts. In every one, we relied on superior technology and tactical optimization. We won through efficiency and overwhelming firepower applied with precision. But I have never seen warriors who embrace chaos as a weapon itself. This is not primitive warfare, Colonel. This is something far more sophisticated than we gave you credit for. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the Velothian's words hanging in the air. Marcus felt a surge of pride for his species, for the pilot standing beside him, for every human who had learned to fight not despite the chaos but because of it. Dawn broke cold and clear over the sprawling combat exercise range, 200 square kilometers of varied terrain that included forests, hills, simulated urban areas, and open plains. Colonel Marcus Webb stood in the command center with the alien delegation, watching multiple holographic displays that showed every angle of the battlefield. The 50 advanced drones were already airborne, their formations perfect, their sensor nets overlapping to create complete battlespace awareness. The drones have established air superiority, reported the tactical officer, a crisp young captain named Morrison. They're running a standard combat air patrol pattern at 12,000 feet, with 4 dedicated ground attack elements and a reserve force positioned for rapid response. By any military analysis, they own this airspace. Marcus nodded, watching the display with experienced eyes. The drones were executing textbook tactics, exactly what any competent force would do. They had height advantage, sensor advantage, weapons range advantage, and numerical superiority. On paper, the upcoming fight should last about 8 minutes before the A-10s were completely eliminated. Status of our forces? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. All 12 Warthogs are on the ground at dispersed locations around the range perimeter. Morrison replied. Pilots are in their aircraft, engines cold. Waiting for your signal, sir. The Krellian ambassador moved closer to the display, its crystalline body reflecting the holographic light in fractal patterns. Colonel, I must protest this setup. You are giving the drones every possible advantage. This is not a fair test. War isn't fair, Marcus replied simply. The enemy doesn't wait for you to be ready. They hit you when you're vulnerable, when you're disorganized, when you're least prepared to fight back. This is the reality of combat. Now watch what happens when humans stop playing fair in return. He keyed his microphone. All hog elements, this is control. You are cleared hot. Execute plan chaos on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. What happened next defied every principle of conventional aerial warfare. Instead of launching together in a coordinated strike package, the 12 A-10s took off from their dispersed locations, simultaneously, but independently. They didn't climb to meet the drones at altitude. They stayed low, dangerously low, using terrain features to mask their approach. They didn't form up into traditional flight elements. Each pilot was essentially operating alone, following a plan that existed only in their heads and their pre-mission briefing. This is madness, Threxnall breathed, watching the tactical display. They have no formation integrity, no coordinated sensor picture, no unified command structure. They are fighting as individuals against a networked enemy force. Exactly, Marcus said. The drones are programmed to fight organized military units using standard tactics. We're not giving them an organized military unit. We're giving them chaos. Captain Chen was the first to engage. She came screaming out of a canyon at treetop level, popped up just long enough to fire a burst from the GAU-8 at a low-flying drone, then dove back into cover before the rest of the enemy formation could react. The targeted drone, its shields configured for high-altitude intercepts, took catastrophic damage from the concentrated kinetic energy and spiraled out of control. Splash 1, Chen reported calmly, already repositioning for her next attack. The drone swarm reacted immediately, redirecting assets toward Chen's last known position. But she was already gone, and by the time they reached the area, Lieutenant Kovac had popped up 2 kilometers away and claimed another kill. The drone shifted again, trying to establish a coordinated response. Then Major Patterson entered the fight from a completely different direction, using a dry riverbed as concealment. He emerged behind 3 drones that had broken formation to pursue another A-10, and his burst from the GAU-8 tore through all 3 before they could react. The drone's AI registered the threat and began executing a tactical realignment. That's when things got truly chaotic. The A-10s weren't just fighting independently, they were actively working to confuse and disorient the drone swarm. One pilot would fire at maximum range with no hope of hitting, just to draw attention. While the drones maneuvered to respond, two other warthogs would attack from unexpected angles. The moment the drones established what they calculated to be an optimal response formation, the A-10s would change tactics completely. "They are not following any doctrine in our databases," the Velothian officer observed, his mechanical suit's processors working overtime to analyze the battle. Every few minutes they shift to completely different tactical approaches. "The drones cannot establish pattern recognition." "That's the point," Marcus explained. "The drones are trying to fight efficiently. They're trying to optimize their response to enemy tactics. But optimization requires time, requires pattern recognition, requires the enemy to behave consistently. We're being inconsistent on purpose. Every time the AI thinks it understands what we're doing, we do something else." One of the younger pilots, a lieutenant named Diaz, demonstrated this principle perfectly. She engaged a drone formation in what appeared to be a standard attack run, then suddenly broke off and dove toward the ground at an angle that should have resulted in a crash. The drones, programmed with safety parameters that prevented such dangerous maneuvers, hesitated for a critical half-second. That's when Diaz pulled out of the dive at an altitude that made several aliens gasp in horror, came up behind the drones, and destroyed two of them before they could reorient. "She should have crashed," the Xinthian commander stated flatly, her scales showing colors that indicated genuine fear. Her aircraft was pulling maneuvers beyond its structural limits. "Beyond its rated limits," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference between what the engineers say is safe and what the airframe can actually handle when you need it to." Human pilots learn to feel that difference, to know exactly how far they can push before something breaks. The drones follow their programming. Humans follow their instincts. The battle continued for another 20 minutes, and the aliens watched in growing astonishment as the impossible happened. The A-10s, outmatched in every measurable category, were winning, not just surviving but actively dominating the engagement. The drones' numerical advantage was meaningless when they couldn't bring their weapons to bear. Their superior speed was useless when the A-10s refused to fight in open airspace. Their advanced sensors were compromised by the extreme low-altitude operations and terrain masking. But it wasn't just tactics that were winning the fight. It was something harder to quantify. When an A-10 took damage, the pilot didn't break off to retreat. They got angry. They got aggressive. They pushed harder. When two warthogs found themselves outnumbered 6-1, they didn't call for help. They attacked because apparently the concept of unfavorable odds was just a suggestion to human pilots. The Centauri observer's energy form was pulsing rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. This should not be possible. The mathematics clearly favor the drones. The probability of this outcome was calculated at less than 3%. Math doesn't account for stubbornness. Captain Chen's voice came over the command net as she executed another impossible maneuver, spiraling around a rocky outcrop to get guns on a drone that had been pursuing her. Or anger, or the fact that I really hate being told the odds. The turning point came when the drones finally tried to adapt. Their AI recognized that the current tactical approach was failing, so they executed a tactical shift, attempting to concentrate their forces for overwhelming local superiority. It was the correct decision based on their programming. It was also exactly what the humans were waiting for. The moment the drones began to cluster, the A-10s changed tactics again. They stopped being unpredictable individuals and suddenly operated as a coordinated unit. They had baited the AI into creating the exact target environment they wanted, concentrated enemy forces in a confined airspace. What followed was a massacre. The warthogs came from 4 directions simultaneously, their GAU-8 cannons creating overlapping fields of fire that shredded the tightly packed drone formation. They planned this, Threxnall realized, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and horror. The entire chaotic engagement was designed to force the drones into this specific tactical error. They were not fighting randomly. They were executing a plan that appeared random. Marcus allowed himself a small smile.
Humans have a saying, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. We planned for the drones to adapt, predicted how they would adapt, and set up the conditions to exploit that adaptation.
The chaos wasn't random. It was calculated chaos, designed to create this exact moment. The exercise ended 11 minutes later. Of the 50 advanced drones, 47 had been destroyed, and 3 were damaged beyond combat effectiveness. Of the 12 A-10s, 2 had taken moderate damage and 1 had lost an engine, but all 12 pilots were alive and all 12 aircraft were recoverable. By any measure, it was a crushing victory for the humans. The command center was silent as the final statistics appeared on the displays. The alien delegation stared at the numbers as if they were personally offensive, which in a way they were. Everything they understood about warfare said this outcome should have been impossible. The conference room was more formal than the previous meetings, with the alien delegation arranged around a circular table that accommodated their various physiologies. Colonel Marcus Webb sat across from them, with Captain Chen and Major Patterson flanking him. The atmosphere was different now, charged with a tension that hadn't existed before. The demonstrations were over. Now came the hard part, the politics. The Krellian ambassador began, its crystalline body positioned to catch the light in what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of assuming a position of authority. Colonel Webb, Captain Chen, Major Patterson, in the past 2 days you have systematically demonstrated capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of military effectiveness. You have shown us that Earth's forces, despite their relatively primitive technology, can compete with and even exceed the performance of far more advanced military assets. Thank you, Ambassador, Marcus replied carefully, sensing a but coming. However, the ambassador continued, and there it was. This presents us with a significant problem. The Galactic Defense Initiative operates on principles of standardization, interoperability, and predictable tactical doctrine. Your approach to warfare is, to be blunt, incompatible with how the rest of the galaxy conducts military operations. Threxnall leaned forward, his mechanical suit whirring softly. The colonel is not wrong in his assessment that we have become perhaps too reliant on technological superiority and optimized tactics. Watching your pilots defeat our drone systems has been humbling and instructive, but it has also been terrifying. Terrifying? Marcus asked, his expression neutral but his mind racing through implications. Terrifying because you fight like cornered predators, the Velothian explained. You embrace tactics that should result in catastrophic losses. You take risks that no rational military commander would approve. And somehow, impossibly, these approaches work. The question we face now is whether the Galactic Defense Initiative is prepared to incorporate warriors who fight this way. The Xinthian commander's scales shifted to diplomatic colors as she spoke. We are also concerned about what happens when humanity is not defending, but attacking. Your defensive capabilities are impressive, even inspiring, but that same creativity and aggression directed offensively could be devastating. The galaxy has enjoyed relative peace for 3 centuries. We worry about what introducing human warfare doctrine might mean for that peace. Marcus felt anger rising but forced it down. They had spent 2 days proving humanity's worth, and now the aliens were getting cold feet about actually working with humans. Captain Chen must have sensed his mood because she placed a hand on his arm, a subtle gesture asking for permission to speak. He nodded. With respect, Commander, Chen said, her voice calm but firm. You're looking at this backwards. You're not introducing human warfare into a peaceful galaxy. You're introducing human warfare into a galaxy that's about to face threats you haven't encountered in centuries. Colonel Webb mentioned interdimensional incursions and hostile species beyond the rim. Those threats don't care about your 3 centuries of relative peace. They're going to hit you with everything they have, and they're not going to follow the rules you're used to. She stood, moving to the holographic display and pulling up footage from the day's exercise. You see these tactics as aggressive and risky. We see them as necessary, because when we fight to win, not to demonstrate technological superiority or achieve optimal efficiency ratings. We fight because losing means people die. Our people, your people, everyone's people. Major Patterson spoke up, his gravelly voice carrying decades of authority. Let me tell you something about predators, Ambassador. Real predators don't hunt for sport. They hunt because they need to eat. Humanity didn't develop these tactics because we enjoy violence. We developed them because for most of our history, losing a battle meant extinction. The tribes that fought fair died out. The nations that followed the rules got conquered. What you're seeing isn't bloodlust. It's survival instinct refined over millennia. The Centauri observer pulsed thoughtfully. An interesting philosophical distinction, Major Patterson, but it does not address the fundamental concern. Can human military doctrine coexist with galactic military standards? Can you operate within the command structures and engagement protocols that govern the defense initiative? Marcus decided it was time to lay out the truth. Consequences be damned. Observer, let me be absolutely clear about something. Earth didn't apply to join the Galactic Defense Initiative because we need your protection. We applied because we were told there are threats coming that will require a united response. We're offering to stand beside you, to bring our experience and capabilities to the fight, but we're not going to pretend to be something we're not. He stood, matching Chen's position. You're right that our doctrine is incompatible with your standardized approaches. So the question isn't whether we can adapt to your way of fighting. The question is whether you can adapt to ours. Because when the real threats arrive, when your optimal tactics and advanced technology aren't enough, you're going to need warriors who know how to win ugly. The silence that followed was heavy. The alien delegation exchanged glances, their various forms of nonverbal communication creating a complex dance of colors, sounds, and movements. Finally, the Krellian ambassador spoke again. Your words are harsh, Colonel, but perhaps they are also necessary. We asked you to demonstrate Earth's military capabilities. You have exceeded that mandate spectacularly. You have forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own military readiness. The ambassador paused, its crystalline body chiming softly. I am prepared to recommend full military integration for Earth into the Galactic Defense Initiative, but with conditions. What conditions? Marcus asked warily. First, human forces will maintain tactical autonomy within the overall strategic framework, the ambassador explained. You will not be required to adopt our standardized doctrine, but you will need to coordinate with allied forces. Second, Earth will establish a training program to teach other species forces about human tactical approaches. We need to learn from you, even if we cannot fully replicate your methods. Third, human forces will be deployed specifically to situations that require unconventional approaches. You will be, in essence, our specialists in impossible situations. Threxnall added his own input. Additionally, I recommend that Earth be given responsibility for developing counterinsurgency and asymmetric warfare doctrines for the defense initiative. Your experience fighting enemies who refuse to engage conventionally may prove invaluable against the threats we face. The Xinthian commander's scales shifted to colors indicating reluctant agreement. I concur with these recommendations. However, I also propose mandatory joint exercises between human and alien forces. We need to learn to work together, to understand each other's strengths and limitations. The demonstration with the A-10 was impressive, but a single aircraft type does not represent Earth's full military capability. Marcus considered the proposals carefully. They weren't perfect, but they represented genuine respect for human capabilities, rather than the condescension that had characterized the start of the week. These conditions are acceptable in principle. We'll need to work out the specifics, of course, but I believe this framework could work. Captain Chen spoke up again. Permission to add something, sir? Go ahead, Captain. If we're going to be training alien forces in human tactics, they need to understand something fundamental, Chen said, addressing the delegation directly. What you saw over the past 2 days wasn't just about the A-10 Thunderbolt. That aircraft is a perfect example of human military philosophy, but it's not the philosophy itself. The real lesson is that humans don't fight the way we're supposed to. We fight the way we need to. Sometimes that means using 70-year-old aircraft designs because they work better than anything newer. Sometimes it means ignoring safety protocols and probability calculations because the mission requires it. She gestured to the holographic display, still showing frozen images from the exercise. If you want to learn from us, you need to accept that we're going to teach you things that seem crazy. We're going to show you tactics that violate every principle of optimal warfare. And you're going to need to trust that these crazy, violating, seemingly suicidal approaches have been tested in actual combat and proven effective. Can you do that? The Centauri observer's energy form pulsed in what the translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. Captain Chen, I believe what you are truly asking is whether we can embrace uncertainty and chaos as strategic tools rather than problems to be eliminated. This represents a fundamental shift in military thinking for most galactic species. That's exactly what I'm asking, Chen confirmed. Major Patterson added his perspective. Look, we're not saying our way is better than yours in all situations. Your advanced technology and optimized tactics are incredible, and we're eager to learn from them. But warfare isn't one-dimensional. Different situations require different approaches. What we're offering is another dimension, Another set of tools for the toolbox. Sometimes you need a precision energy weapon. Sometimes you need a plane built around a cannon that goes bertie.